and...
Oh, okay, I'm going to take up the UN first, because it's true that we have not been able to go further from 5 members, and so many other members. The world has changed from 1945 to 2010, and of course we need Security Council members, well-deserving members like India and Brazil, and like countries like Japan, who spends or gives lots of money to UN and things like that, to have and representation from Africa and Middle East. I mean, we have to live in a real world. But even if you go, which I have many times gone to the UK minister who is responsible for United Nations, etc., and others have, and they says, yes, I agree with everything you are saying, but we cannot forego the veto. I said, at least somebody should make the headway to start it, or if you don't want to do it, give equal powers to others. But the issue is still hanging on. I don't know. I mean, it is in that kind of state. But all these other countries do deserve, and to make, frankly speaking, what will happen in the next 30, 40 years if India and China overgrow and become the masters of the world? Then what will happen is they will forego the United Security Council and make their own decisions. Let me quickly go to the trident question, that all I would say is that it makes common sense to investigate or to find out non-military options, because it hasn't worked. I mean, who are we, as Frank is saying, who are we having a nuking, who are we going to attack? But all it has done is, in the last 30 years, that we have spent 3 billion just to maintain it, and we are embarking on an expensive program of 75 billion to have a new trident system, which we don't need it, we don't deserve it, and you can see how many nurses, teachers, and hospitals we can make out of it. Thank you.
Right, so Jack at the back here, and so 3. So if you want to...
Thank you. My name is Peter Greaves. Richard referred, when he was talking about the need for raising additional resources, he warned against using VAT as a means of doing that. Now, some of you may have seen 5 days ago in The Guardian, on the 10th of June, under the heading, Thinking the Truly Unthinkable on Poverty and Inequality, there were 2 letters, one of which was signed by several people, including Kate Pickett and Richard Wilkinson, authors of that brilliant book, The Spirit Level, that Richard referred to. And they said that the Child Poverty Act, this is in this country of course, requires government to measure both relative and absolute poverty. They go on, it is deeply concerning that the government is considering adopting a definition of poverty that only describes absolute levels of income. And towards the end, they talk about if resources are to be raised with an increase in VAT, then inequality will rocket. Now people often wonder, what do we do about these things? Here is a practical thing. Those of you who feel concerned about this, write your MPs and say, for God's sake, think again about this important point. Thank you.
There was a gentleman there.
I'm Fazil Kunka, Peace and Justice Network, Milton Keynes, and Interfaith, MK. I have a question, which is 2 questions really, which are connected with the economy. It is, and I'd like your views on this, because I myself am not very certain about this. You see, the NGOs, many charitable, UNICEF, ActionAid, Oxfam, etc., have been doing very good work, in my opinion, in plugging the gap in many of these countries. But it is, I've heard it said from various sources that actually they do more harm than good, because it transfers the responsibility of alleviating poverty or bringing about relief on the part of the society and the government of those countries. And I'd just like to hear your views on that. The other question, which is a much more philosophical question, which is that in view of the fact that the structure of society is so disparate, and it has been historically, maybe it's getting worse, isn't the priority really of eliminating abject poverty and allowing growth and, rich people become richer, at least for some time, until this is achieved, if that is the only mechanism whereby we could do this?
Gentleman at the back, you had your hand up, yes.
So, just in connection with the point about the lack of democracy in the
Your
United
name,
States.
please. Just your name, please, and your
Anthony Keston from Institute of Law and Peace. I'd like to recommend, respectfully, that the meeting perhaps request Lord Judge to make approaches within the government to again make approaches to our member of the General Assembly to initiate legislation to increase the numbers of countries represented in the Assembly to the Security Council, because this is, as I see it, a legislative problem. I forget which article it is, but there's an article in the UN Charter which stipulates the membership of the UN. That needs to be altered, and as I understand it, that can only be done by a resolution of the General Assembly. So it seems to me we need to initiate a legislative process whereby, hopefully, other countries agreeing, the Assembly agreed to make the necessary alteration to the Charter, which is not unprecedented because the Charter has been amended from time to time by resolutions of the Assembly. So I would ask that perhaps the meeting officially request respectfully to Lord Judd that he initiates a motion in the House of Lords or whatever the procedure is appropriate to make the appropriate approaches to the, presumably the Foreign Office. I don't know what the mechanisms are, but to get it filtered through to the Assembly. And of course, more naturally, one needs to bring in agreement of other countries to this end. I've forgotten actually what the necessarily majority is in the Assembly is necessary to make an alteration to the relevant article of the Charter. But we need to transfer this aspiration into a concrete approach to the problem.
Thank you. So shall we start with the last point first? We're not required to increase it.
Well, I can give you my word that I will go on advocating reform of the Security Council membership and certainly permanent membership. I was privileged to be a member of the Commission on Global Governance just over 10 years ago, and we certainly advocated that very strongly then. And we really must have, that was the commission chaired by Sonny Ramphal and the Swedish Prime Minister, and we really, we haven't made progress. It's disgraceful that we haven't made progress, and we must just keep at it. But may I just make two points very briefly about the Security Council and about the UN in that context. I mentioned that I found it odd that we had G7, we had IMF, we had the World Bank and so on, and that economic and social and global affairs are, absolutely crucial to global security. We need, as Richard was saying, we need a redefinition of security. I think that's absolutely right. I am not suggesting, as a practical, it's a compromise, if you like, on perfection, but I am not actually suggesting that the Security Council should run the IMF or the World Bank. But there ought to be some way in which the World Bank and the IMF have to give account to the Security Council. And the trouble is that the Economic and Social Council has always been and also ran. It just has always, when I was a minister, it was regarded, it was the devil's own job to have proper representation from Britain at the economic, because it just wasn't seen as a mainstream player. Now, I think this is disastrous in the modern context, particularly, where we've seen the relevance of economic and social matters. So I think it's not just the membership of the Security Council, it's the definition of security and how we bring these various bits together. But there's a second point I've made, is that